All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to a webinar for action items and the workflow in manageONE. I'm Stephanie Pepper. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into it since we got started a little bit late. So thanks again for coming. What you're looking at here on my home screen, I'll zoom in on a few places here. This is something that I put together for my new implementations when I go out on site and train brand new clients on the software. Just visually, sometimes it can be helpful to look at a chart and kind of see how the workflow works in eManage. Obviously, you're going to find out here pretty soon, if you don't already know, it's very, very customizable, and you can really customize it to what works best for your dealership. So everybody's flow is going to be a little bit different, but the purpose of today is, we want you to walk away knowing how to manipulate your workflow, how to better utilize it and utilize the action items, and really make sure everyone's on the same page with the importance of action items and the workflow. So this here, is a very basic general workflow. You can see, and if anybody wants this document, if you'd like to have this, and you can edit it if you'd like, just reach out to me via email and I'd be happy to shoot it over to you. But you can see here, it starts with the customer request, for pricing. So typically, it's sales is creating the project, and then it gets passed off, design handles it for a little bit, then you can get a labor quote, then the quote, and it just flows through, all the way through to invoicing and commissions. So underneath some of these, you're going to see little notes. I'll actually zoom into this here. I have little notes, to remind you of little steps that you should be doing at certain places in the workflow. So, after scheduling installation is complete, the work order comes back marked as complete, you should be marking your installs as complete, as we reviewed in the scheduling webinar. Then you create an action item for client billing, make sure you're marking your orders as complete, the little notes of what you should be reminding yourself to do when doing that certain step. So we're going to go over in very, very much detail on how to create action items, how to edit them, and all of that. But this will just give you a good idea of kind of the workflow, just basic general workflow. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Just I'm going to actually break down what all of this means first, and then we can walk through how to actually create an action item or edit an action item. So to get to where I am at right now, you need to open up your eManage administrator. You have to have access to get into the administrator. So not everyone's going to be able to just to get in and manipulate your action items or your workflow. And that's the way you want to keep it. To get into the administrator, main tool menu, open the administrator. From there, in the administrator, you're going to go tools, project action items configuration. Okay. And so what this screen is showing you is when you go to submit an action item in the actual database, that's your list here. So when I click on that little submit action item request button, that shortcut there that's been added in fairly recently, if you're not aware, there it is. But that's this list here. Should always be in order of your workflow. You don't want, send client invoice at the top. You really want it to flow and be organized by organize the priority based on the workflow. Okay, so all you're seeing in this screen here is that list there I just showed you. Okay, so that's your action item name, what the actual title of the action item is. In use means it's active and available to actually select when submitting an action item. So if you no longer need that action item, just uncheck it. All users, this checkbox next to the next one over, all users, if that is not checked, that means that a salesperson, if they're labeled as a salesperson, that they cannot submit that action item. Typically, all your action items are just all checked off all the way down as a standard setup. But if you have action items that you don't want your salespeople submitting, I like to use, for example, schedule commissions. They're not typically deciding when a commission should be scheduled or not. Usually that's taking place in the accounting world. So if you don't want salesperson to even have access to that button, you can uncheck that. Okay, so that's what that checkbox is there. The next one over, alert sales. That means that the salesperson is going to get an alert and when that action item is completed or rejected. So you can see here, it's marked to be on all of my action items. So a salesperson is automatically, if that is checked on, going to receive an alert along every step of the way on every project that has their name on it. Okay, so alert sales. You can turn that off. I typically suggest, if you're getting started, if you don't have this, process in place already, I like to have it checked on as a start, and then let people use it, let people get used to it, and then they'll tell you, you want to talk about it, communicate. Is the salesperson coming to you and saying, I'm just getting way too many alerts, I only need to be notified when it's ABC? Talk about those things and decide how to best utilize this part of the system. The next column over, it's open with. That tells the system which window you want the action item to open when the person's checking out the action item actually opens up the action item. So for example, request drawings, project information, review, enter acknowledgements, acknowledgements and costing. So if you're opening up action items and it's not taking you directly to the window that you typically need to get into, talk to your admin, make sure that it's set up correctly so that you're not having to navigate to a window every single time. If it's opening up a window that you feel like it shouldn't be, and you're always navigating to a different window, talk about that and flip it over. One less click that you have to worry about. Save you a little time there. That's pretty neat. You click on these drop downs, it'll give you options of what you can open. So it's not just modules. Sometimes you're going to have documents. So that's not a module there. You can have that calendar open. So there's a couple in there that are not just modules. Checkout status change. That means when the person receiving the action item, when they open it up, it's going to automatically change the status from whatever it was to this status here. Checking out an action item just means I'm opening it up, I'm looking at it, I'm checking it out. Okay. So usually it's something like in progress, something like that. I'm going to come back to statuses. I just want you to know what each one of these mean, and then we'll dive deeper into suggestions and best practices and on what you should be putting in these fields. Completion status change. So when they actually complete the action item, it automatically changes from this status to this status. Okay. So that's one of the really big benefits of action items, automating that project status and order status, which I'll get to in just a moment. But, you shouldn't have to rely on manually changing statuses. You should let the system just automatically change it. Now, you can always override it and flip it if you need to. If there are any manual flips of statuses that you have in place, that's totally fine. But for the most part, you should be letting the system do its thing. One less thing you have to worry about missing or getting wrong. Check out order status. So if you're one of my recent implementations, I've been kind of playing with this whole workflow, so I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But if you're one of my more recent implementations, you might have heard me say, keep it simple and just do project statuses. But we're actually going to talk about order statuses today. A lot of folks aren't taking advantage of that order status, and we've kind of been talking internally about how to best utilize that. It can be difficult to decide, there's statuses and drop downs all over the system. What's the best way to use these statuses? So I am going to go over that. But this works exactly the same as I talked about with the status changes here. When you open up an action item, it automatically changes the order status on checkout and then on completion. Okay. But order statuses can be different than project statuses. Okay. So, at this early stages, before it ever even gets, processed as an order, you technically don't have an order, but the system does place what I like to call like a ghost order behind the scenes. So it is actually keeping up even with that ghost order status. Okay, so you can, have statuses on an order previous to it even being an order. Okay, we'll get to that in just a moment. So yeah, completing automatically changes as well. Over here, last but not least, there's some other items over here, but they're not really important. This priority, super important. Like I mentioned at the beginning, keeping that workflow is in order of how you do business is, really best. It's the best practice there. So you can change the priority and keep them in order of how that workflow is for you guys. So you can see I always number, this is just you've heard me say this before, probably in another webinar. There are some areas in the system where you absolutely have to use 2 digits. So I apply that all over the system, everywhere. I always use 2 digits, and I give myself some extra spacing. So 10, 20, 30, 40. That way you have some wiggle room in between. So if you added something in the middle of your workflow, now I can put something at 35. Give yourself some wiggle room, because it will change. It's going to change a lot. If you don't already have this in place, or you're about to start maybe revamping it, or revisiting your workflow and kind of tightening it up and cleaning it up, you want to make sure that you have some wiggle room to play, because it will change. I know when at my old dealership, it was constantly changing, from the first day that we implemented this, for the years after. So, and you want it to, you really want to start thinking, how can I better utilize the action item list to make my processes easier and flow better in the system? So it really makes you think outside the box. Okay. So brainstorm on that as a team, talk about action items in your meetings. So important. And in groups are really, really helpful. You talk to the people who are receiving the action items, talk to the people who are sending the action items. Okay. All right, so everything that I just went over on this screen right here, the meaning of all this, you're actually going to see it duplicated over here with some additional settings. But here, the name of the action item, that's right here. I tend to make my adjustments on this side, and the reason being, I'm sure one day it'll be fixed, but right now, if you went over here and you just changed this name here, it does lose some of its settings. So I highly suggest making all of your changes on the right panel. It does let you do it over here, but I highly suggest highlighting and making your changes on the right panel. Just a word of advice there. So you can see all users can submit this action item. That's the same thing here. Okay. So some of the ones that are not in the grid, apply time as commissionable after this many occurrences. This is a new setting, fairly new to eManage, but what this is giving you the ability to do is choose action items that you do want to apply as commissionable cost. We're always trying to think of ways to just help with some of the areas in the dealerships that are a little bit more difficult to gauge, like, for example, design. Everyone has that struggle, how are we applying the design cost? Do we apply the design cost? And if we do, how do we go about doing that? You can add a journal entry, of course, and that's what a lot of people are doing, but now you have the ability to come in here and say, you know what, for request drawings, I'm going to apply time as commissionable. So that means, very important, best practice number 1, which I'll go over again here in a moment, but while we're on the topic, opening up your action item, it is running a little timer, on you. So if you do mark something as apply time as commissionable, I definitely let whoever is receiving those action items know. That way you can make sure to give them a friendly reminder to only open the action item and leave the action item open when they're working on that specific request. Close it out or complete it when you're not working on that request. I know that can sometimes be more difficult than said, because we're all getting pulled in different directions, but it is very important. So policy is policy. So you can also tell it to do it after a certain amount of occurrences. You can leave that blank if you want it to just always apply time as commissionable for that action item. Or you can say, you know what, after 2 occurrences, because we're asking for revisions or what have you, maybe that's when you start charging that time. I have a separate action item here that I like to use, request revision to drawing. I like to run reports on how many revisions are we actually requesting. You can group it by customer, run all kinds of reports, and really start to put that data together so that you can better run the business. The other one that's not in the grid, send email to salesperson when, I don't know why it's cut off, like when request drawings, I guess. But that basically means when you want to alert your salesperson via email, it's still going to send an alert in the system. So it's a double alert, but especially for salespeople who, should be out in the field and, customer facing, you know, if they want an alert on an action item, that might be very imperative that they get an alert for that anytime it's completed or rejected. You can opt in to send them an email. So pretty neat little addition there. I wouldn't, talk to your salespeople. I wouldn't just start turning that on for every single action item. That might get a little bit overwhelming, but it will send them an alert that the action item was completed or rejected, and the reason why. So your little completion note in your action item will also submit with that email. So pretty nice feature there. Obviously, if you make any changes to this top part or the bottom part, both, make sure you hit save. We'll get to the new button in just a moment. On checkout, same thing here. So on checkout opens this window, checkout statuses, all of that. A couple of other little checkboxes below you might want to know about. Require order. That typically is not checked up until the point of after you actually ask to process the order. And the reason for that is because there is no order. So it's not connecting. It's connecting to that ghost order, but it shouldn't be a requirement because there technically is no order until after this. I am going to go over that again when actually submitting action items, because you could run into an issue there. So I'll let you know about that, but that's what that checkbox means. You have do not allow submission if on credit hold. So if you actually place the customer on a credit hold on the client file, the actual customer record in the regular application, you can tell the system you cannot send an action item because they are on credit hold. So nothing can be done until that credit hold is removed. So same thing at the bottom. On completion, project status changes to this status. That's all this up here. The other tab, so this was under general settings. Under assignments is where you actually assign your groups, your prerequisites, and your completion tasks, and which project types can have that action item submitted on. So with that being said, action items are dictated off of project types. So if ever in the regular system, you have an employee come up to you and say, I'm trying to submit an action item for ABC and it's not on my list, it could be because that project type is incorrect and it was, that needs to be flipped to the right one. Or if you go into your administrator, that project type was not made available for that particular action item. So highlight your action item and assign your project types. So what that means, you can have a whole different list, whole different set of action items per project type. So if you, handle your service and warranty, different, you go to all different types of people, the action item list is different. You can customize those per project type. If you're just getting started on this, I highly suggest that you kind of make everything as consistent as possible. So just making all the action items available for all the projects is typically a good route to take. And then as you get your feet wet, really start to use it, see the benefits of everything, then you can go back and kind of rethink how you can better utilize the project types and action items. So I just kind of skipped right over this, but choose responsible groups. So you can see here, request drawings. I have it selected to go to the design group. So with that being said, action items, the whole purpose of action items are the meaning behind them. You're supposed to be able to send them to groups of people, okay? And it creates a form of backup. So if you have Susie out of the office today and someone specifically sent an action item to Susie, they chose to send it directly to her, it's just sitting in her queue and no one even has visually, no one's seeing it. And so it's just sitting in there until Susie comes back. So we really like to encourage you to make sure you're setting it up that way. But you do have the ability to give the rights to users to assign action items to individual users. You do have that option. Not something that I usually suggest. It just, another reason could be, I hate to say it, but some people can play favoritism here and there. And it's like, I always only want to work with this designer. Now maybe this designer's plate is way more full than some of the other designers. So if you put it to the whole group, everyone can see it. You know, if there's no designer added on to that project, maybe whoever has the time to pick it up just picks it up. And if you don't work that way, you know, that's fine. You can tell it to assign to individual users, and that is a user right, which we went over in another webinar. So if you have questions about that, definitely reference back to that administrator webinar. Okay, so let me talk about these responsible groups. If you go now to tools, so I'm always going to be in tools when I'm talking about action item configuration. You know, under users, this was all user rights stuff. So tools is going to be outside of users and user rights, but you do have user groups configuration, which is directly connected to project action items. So if I click on that, tools, user groups configuration, and I go down to my design group. So I'm just hitting the drop down, choosing design. I can see, excuse me, I can see who is in that group. So, you know, Melanie comes over to you and she's like, Allie said that she got this action item, but I'm not seeing it. The first thing that I would do is go into my action item configuration, highlight that action item, see who the group is, go into the user group configuration, and boom, check off Melanie. You're supposed to be in that group. So when you get new users, new employees, definitely, you know, use this new employee setup list, which should talk about adding a user into a user group. Yeah, there you go. So that's one of the things, like if they are to receive certain action items, that's a checklist that, you know, when you're setting up a new user, there's a lot of little things, a lot of little settings that have to be done. So definitely make sure you do that. Or like I said, if you need to go back and check why someone may not be receiving an action item, that could be one reason. I'll go over a couple of other reasons later. Sorry, setting up new users. New user groups. So let's say, you know, maybe I have operations, but maybe I need a scheduling user group. Maybe that's different than my operations group. To set up a new group, you literally just start typing and then hit save. And then you hit the drop down again, select scheduling, then check off who should be in that group. Made a mistake, didn't mean to add that group, hit delete. You have a couple of other options here, alerting a group when something's on hold, alerting a group when something's canceled. I don't know very many people that use that, but you have some options there. All right, so go through and select your project types that apply to that action item. You'll just click these on. Okay. And then you can select prerequisites. Unfortunately, you do have to go through each project type and choose your prerequisites to completion tasks. Definitely on my wish list to improve this, this whole module. So will be happening at some point, but we'll definitely make that a little bit easier at some point. But here's your list of prerequisites. So prerequisites, talk about those. When you're in the project and you go to submit an action item, prerequisites are so important. It is a list of things that should be supplied, information, notes, you know, different information that needs to be supplied to the person on the other end of receiving that action item. So like I was talking about, talk with your groups, talk with the group that's receiving that action item. What is Bobby Joe always forgetting to put inside that action item? Make it a prerequisite. Hold each other accountable. The accountability part of this whole workflow, another really great benefit. You know, I've seen lots of customers that have been on the software for some time, and I see go behind people and they're just like check, not even reading them. You know, they're there for a reason. They're there to remind you of what information you should be supplying. That way, there's as minimal holdup as possible when requesting something. You know, we're trying to eliminate the back and forth. You know, we don't want to take away the human connection. We want you guys to still be communicating and talking to each other. But if there's, you know, the same information is required every single time that I need to submit this action item, you know, put it in a prerequisite or a survey, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But I like to use this one as an example. Client approved book order. Generate and send vendor PO. If you have that kind of all lumped into one, the person that's booking the order and sending the POs, you can split those out if you'd like. But, you know, selecting that, it's going to give you a whole list here. Attach note, customer PO, or signed quote. What I do is I just check it or note it, then check it. Doesn't really matter to me, just that you're reading it. But I can go up here and say, okay, note customer PO. All right, PO number is 12565. Okay. I like to put as a prerequisite, we talked about this in the order entry webinar, but just to kind of connect the dots on everything, you know, I put attach / note customer PO or signed quote. You know, if they signed a quote, I would be putting PO, you know, Bob Jones. We can't always read those signatures, but I like to at least put something in that PO field. It kind of helps the accounting department less bounce back from them. If there's a name in that PO field, if you did not get an actual PO number from the customer, they don't give you POs or whatever the reason might be, put the person's name in there. So that's what this is telling me, like note that name. And that's one less thing that order entry has to go hunting down, okay? So, you know, note requested approximate install date. So all these prerequisites, you literally just like action items are internal emails. So instead of submitting an action item to Melanie and saying, hey, can you invoice this? You know, I'm going to send an action item. It's all tracked in eManage. We're tracking that history. We're holding each other accountable. So a lot of benefits from action items here. So just like an internal email, note all these things, put it down here, attach documents if necessary. So you can go history, documents, drag and drop the document right here into supporting documents. One less thing that the other person receiving that action item has to go hunt down. So we're trying to make everybody's lives a little bit easier, make their jobs a little easier, give them everything that they need in order to complete that function. Prerequisites. So important. Can't stress that enough. To add a new prerequisite into this list, you're going to be in corporate division configuration. So tools, corporate division configuration, and you're going to access that drop-down list setup that we talked about in that admin webinar. So I'm in tools, corporate division configuration, drop-down list setup. You'll go down to, up. It's all the way at the top. Action item prerequisites. So here's my list here of options to add as a prerequisite. Same exact concept for completion tasks. It's just right above it. Completion tasks are things to hold the person actually doing the action item accountable. So if I go into an action item here, I'm not sure that I have any completion tasks on this one. But invoice for final, I don't know, check tax, check bill to, sent email, I don't know, things that so there's some here, check tax, tax checked, saved customer invoice to project documents, little reminders of what the person on the other end needs to do to fully complete this task. That's what completion tasks are. So we're holding each other accountable. So those, you know, I have a lot of companies that, you know, install drawings. How difficult is it to get install drawings? We're always running around with our heads cut off last minute trying to get an install drawing. Make that a completion task on one action item. You know, attached install drawing to project documents, somewhere at the front end, preferably. Okay, so completion tasks. So you just literally just hit this little triangle and check off the prerequisites and completion tasks per project type. All right. Questions, if you have any questions about that, feel free to chat them in and I'll get to questions here at the end. But if something pops up in your head, feel free to just go ahead and chat that in. Choose action item surveys. This is also fairly new for eManage. So what this is telling you is that per action item, I can actually say, you know what, when submitting that action item, they need to attach and fill out and attach this survey. So request drawings, there's a couple samples here. I'm in two databases because I want you guys to, I want to show off a new client, what they've been doing with their action items that I find very helpful. Okay, so submitting an action item. Request drawings, you can see mine are not in order. And here at the bottom, there's a survey. So seating quantity. So surveys in eManage are questions and answers. So what, I've seen some people even do a survey for this. So all the prerequisites that I have, they actually made that as a survey, so that they can just check, yes, no, fill it in, type thing. But that's an option there. But I really like surveys for certain things. You don't want to go crazy and put a survey on everything, but there are certain areas where this can be really helpful. Um, Requesting drawings. If there's questions that designers, a document that they have that they're working off of, implement that document as a survey into eManage, and now it'll be all tracked there. So surveys are questions and answers, and you can have as many surveys on an action item as you feel necessary. Typically, you're just gonna have one per action item, but cool. Okay, so let's see, what else? Let's get to some of the more important stuff. Okay, so project statuses and order statuses. And then I'll get to some best practices when actually opening up action items and submitting action items. So project statuses and order statuses. And like I said, if you have been a recent implementation, or maybe you're using what was already kind of built into the system and haven't really manipulated this much, you're probably going to see something like what you're looking at on my screen. Project status of, when request drawings goes through, design in progress, design complete. Very general statuses, right? Something's in progress, a process, and then it's completed. So with that being said, you just so it's very clear for everyone, you cannot look at a status and determine where a project is at. Statuses can sometimes bounce around a little bit. For example, receiving. When I send an action item to the operations team or the receiving team to receive something, one purchase order or one acknowledgement might be received, but a part of the rest of the project hasn't. So if I look at the status and it just says received, I can't just assume, oh, everything's here, I can schedule it. Or if that's, how you actually do scheduling. A lot of you are scheduling based off of acknowledgement dates, but the point is you can't just look at a status and know exactly where a project is at. You kind of have to dig in a little bit. But, statuses, you can completely customize them. So what I want to show off is a client that I just worked with that really started thinking outside the box on statuses. And they created, they already had a kind of a system in place where they were using something outside of eManage to manage their leads and opportunities before they came on to eManage. And so they wanted to figure out how can I use that in eManage. And they really liked the way that it reported inside that other program that they were using. So we kind of recreated it. And so this is kind of an idea of what it looks like. They like to use these statuses, and it's numbered. So this is actually their current opportunities grid, and they have it defaulted to group by project statuses. So in meetings, they can just look at, okay, what needs attention? And these are all the projects of status of needs attention. And the numbers in front, that's the actual status. So the project status is 01, close parentheses, space, leave in. That way it would organize this way. So I thought that was really cool. So what we did was we actually, all those general statuses, we thought, well, what better way to use them than order statuses? So let me see if any of these probably don't have any. I don't want to show too much. I kind of hid some things so you don't see too much of their opportunities here. But basically what they did, okay, yeah, actually this window would be a good way to show you. They've since updated some of their action item list, I see, which is great. They're going in and manipulating it, but you can see here that it's still changing based off of where it's at. So some of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those were all pre-booking, pre-ordering, but very important statuses for them. So, at the time of sending through to request proposal, it stays as pending, then it needs attention. And they may do some manual flipping, on the project status a little bit here and there. But after it gets to a certain point, it's going to flip on its own. But you can see here, now they put all these statuses kind of in order status, because statuses can be different per order. So something that I hadn't really thought about too much with some of my more recent implementations. So I hope that you guys are understanding this, but they really helped me kind of think outside the box and how you can use order status. And I really love it. I think because you can have multiple orders, it's important that you do set up your order statuses. You know, what I mean by that is you could have your original order, and then now I have a punch. Well, I want to see what the order status is for the original, but now I also want to see what the order status is for the punch. And those can show differently. You know, with the project status, you only have one project status. So that should be, you know, the more, and you may not use the same, you know, wording that they use. That might not make sense to you, but, you know, coming up with some system of a more general opportunity type status for project status, and then more specific on order status. I hope that makes sense. If there's questions, we'll talk about it, but I kind of just wanted to make sure that you start rethinking this. If you already have this in place, maybe start rethinking your order status. And I love to talk about this kind of stuff, process improvements. That's my thing. So if you want to bounce anything off me and start putting something into place here, absolutely feel free to reach out to me. I love to brainstorm on that kind of stuff and help make the workflow much easier and more efficient. Okay. All right, let's actually submit an action item and talk about, open up an action item, talk about some best practices there. So kind of already talked about it, but just to reiterate, you know, when submitting an action item, you now have that expose button there, but you can always get to it from your right-click menu as well. So anytime you're in the current opportunities grid or your backlog, know that you don't have to be in the project to submit an action item. You can always right-click to access actions, submit an action item request, or if you're in the project, access that quick icon there. It's still here as well if you need to get to it that way. Like I said before, you know, pay attention to those prerequisites. Okay, they're not just there to go check. They're there for a reason. Hold each other accountable. You check it off, check it on, and say that I actually did, you know, note the requested approximate install date, and the person who got this action item, you did not actually note it. You know, they have the option to reject an action item. Everyone's favorite button, reject. You can reject an action item. I typically like to say, you know, if you're going to definitely enforce it at some point, but if you're getting started on these action items, pump the brakes a little bit, because when you do reject an action item, that means whoever submitted that action item does have to go back in and do the whole thing over again, reattach their documents, renote everything. But I'll tell you that they will learn their lesson. So use the reject button if, you know, if you get to that point, but also maybe, I used to say send a courtesy email, but if that's only if you don't have, you know, send email to salesperson when checked on, because obviously it's going to automatically send them. But I like, you know, courtesy emails. Hey, I rejected your action item because you didn't tell me what quote number to process. You know, I'm not a mind reader. If there's multiple quotes on this project, I don't know what quote you're asking me to process. So hold each other accountable. Okay, so prerequisites are very important. Okay, so do by. Do by can change, you know, for each action item. I use this in different ways, you know, for approved book order, you know, typically that's today's date, or if it's in no rush, you know, process by the end of the week. Be realistic there, you know, whoever's receiving action items is looking at those due by dates, right? We are looking at those, hopefully. But you know, so that they can prioritize, and the ones that, you know, need to be done immediately, you know, they're working off those due by dates. So be realistic there. But I like, you know, let's say review enter acknowledgements. You know, when I send this action item, the due by date, receive order, this one, note acknowledge ship date. I might just put that in the due by box. And that way, when they go to actions to perform, your receiving team, they're gonna have a whole list of all the stuff that they're expecting to receive in, kind of a projections list, but it's sorted by, should be sorted by requested date. So the stuff that's gonna be coming in sooner than later, you know, is gonna be up top. So because of that expected acknowledged ship date. Same for like scheduling. You know, if I send an action item for scheduling, The due by date, I'm going to put the actual requested install date there. So it can be used in different ways, or you can truly use it just for due by. When do I need this action item to be completed? Up to you. Assign to user, that's what I was talking about. When you give the rights to someone to override and assign to a user. So you're overriding the group and saying, I don't want to send it to that group. I want to send it to a specific person. Again, not something we totally recommend, but it's a possibility. If that's what works best for your workflow, that's what works best for your workflow. So we're not going to say you can't do that, but definitely something we don't suggest. But you can just flip that down and assign to a user. If you leave it blank, or if you don't have the rights to do so, it should be grayed out, and you don't even have the ability to click that. So you just skip right over that and continue submitting the action item. Okay. And if you do have the rights to do it and it's not grayed out and you skip over that, it's just going to go to the group that it's supposed to go to. Okay. Okay, customer order. So what I was talking about with multiple orders, and on the admin, this checkbox here, require order. So you can see after it's actually been processed, review enter acknowledgements, it's telling me I have to put an order in. So if I went to review enter acknowledgements and I said, okay, acknowledgements attached, blah, 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 I need it done by this day. You're going to see here, I have multiple done. So if I try to submit this request, it's going to tell me, hey, you haven't chosen an order. You need to choose an order. Hit OK. So if you get that message, it's because you didn't choose an order here. Again, everything before processing an order, it's going to be blank. There's nothing there. It should just say new order. It'll just be that blank ghost order that we call new order. Once the order has been booked in order entry, you should start seeing your quote numbers here. If you're following our best practices from the order entry webinar, you should be seeing quote numbers here, and might have some additional text, but it is you should at minimum have that quote number in there. And that's why, when I go to invoicing, invoice for final. Okay. Check, check, check. Don't do that. I'm telling them, okay, I need you to invoice 25042. Now you can, let's say you're ready to invoice both of those orders. Technically you can submit one action item for both orders and just note it down here, please invoice 25031 and 25042. Okay. You can do that. What this is doing, when it does allow you to connect it to an order, it is running that timer on the order. So be cautious there, especially with this new feature, apply time as commissionable. It will be applying that time to that order. So when you actually go to schedule commissions, which is on orders per order, you would want to make sure that that cost is being applied to the correct order, or a little bit here and a little bit here. So if you are putting that in place, I just make sure to talk about that as a team and make sure you're sending an action item per order. Cool. Supporting documents, again, drag and drop those documents right here from history documents. You can actually attach documents from outside the system. So what I do is you can either drag this, to one, if you have multiple monitors, drag this to the other screen and then drag and drop it. But know that you always have this little feature. We talked about this in one of the webinars, but just so you know, again, hitting this little thing pops a window out, and you'll see this little icon throughout the entire system in different places. But you can pop that out and then use a sticky note to stick it on top. I only have one screen, so I might use that feature. And then I can, grab a document and just drag and drop into supporting documents. When you do that, not playing along with me right now, you can totally do that. Just trust me on that. I'm in a test environment. But when you drag and drop those documents, you can, it does actually attach it to the project as well. So it's kind of two birds with one stone. Instead of save as, manageONE upload to record, attaching the document, dragging and dropping, you can drag right into your action item if you didn't already have it in your history documents. and it will attach it there. Just make sure you change the document type because it does want to automatically put it in the general category. It can be flipped, after by going to History Documents and flipping it there. But if you remember to do it here, it's one less thing you have to worry about. All right. Oh, uploading docs. I've never seen that. Oh, it was a very large document. I shouldn't have done that. Oopsie. Okay, so that's submitting action items, actions to perform. And these are your actual action items to do. So just to review again, actions to perform are action items for you to do. Okay, open actions are just FYIs out there for someone else to do on your behalf, or action items that you've personally sent out. So that's just FYI. Those are not action items for you to do. Actions to perform will group up by action item type. If you attended the last webinar on grid layouts, know that you can customize this grid to whatever makes sense for you. If you don't like that it's grouped and you want to see everything in one little screen, grab that and just drag and drop it away. I like to see it grouped by type, but that's just kind of how I work. So it's whatever makes sense for you, what works best for you. And you can customize those per user or for the entire company. So if you did not catch that webinar, please go back and watch that one on YouTube. We want you to know how to customize your database, customize your grid layouts. Okay, so a couple best practices here on action items when actually performing them. Obviously, when you double click and open them up, you want them opening up the window that you should be automatically going into. So make sure you adjust that in the admin. This says this action item is checked out by another user. Are you sure you want to open this action item? You will get this pop-up. It's just a warning that's telling you, even if it was yourself, that someone has opened up that action item and taken a peek. So they just looked at it. And maybe something's been done on it, maybe it hasn't. So it's warning you, hey, someone's already on this one. Do you want to continue? Yes. In your actions to perform grid, it will show you who was last to check it out and all that good stuff. So you get a lot of good information there. Come on. So I should have opened up the window. I'm in review, enter acknowledgements action item. So it'll tell you which action item you're working on right there. Tell you what company, who submitted it, when they submitted it, when they're asking for it back. You can adjust this % complete. Maybe I'm halfway done, but I'm waiting on someone to do something, and I'm hoping to get it done by this Friday. These are things that you can do to just kind of prioritize yourself, and they can see that stuff. So if I just updated that, maybe I make a little note down here. I love notes. I love making notes for yourself and for other people. So maybe I'm waiting on Melanie to attach acknowledgement. Whatever the thing is, I typically date everything and with my initials. That's just the best practice I kind of put in place. We're in 2020, y'all. So I like to do that just as a best practice. But if I just hit update here, not complete, not reject, if I just hit update and I go back to my actions to perform grid, it's right there. So if you worked in groups, like design, I always use design as an example. Great way to make sure that everyone can see that you're on it, you're handling, and who's handling it, initials, date, and what you might be waiting on, or, whatever little notes that you need to make. I love that note section. That's the reply. And then you just hit update. So for my designers, I like to, depending on your setup, typically what I see the designer's name in is under team members. If you're not using team members, but a lot of time, I have some companies that put the designers in the project manager field if they don't have project managers. So it really depends on your setup. But you have 2 fields that you do fill in on the project information screen already. So if there's a third player that you want, kind of assigned to this project and to be helpful for, opening action items, reports, things like that, I love the team members. And you can find that in the project information under team members / activity. And I think I missed this in the project information webinar, so please share this with your whole team if you find this helpful. But under team members activity, I typically say this is a great place to put the designer. No need to put, the salesperson again. Salesperson's already on here. Project manager already on there. So don't overdo this field. If you're going to use it for designers, make sure everyone's on the same page. This is where we are assigning our designers. So, typically, your design group is one of the larger groups in the companies. So I love to use that to help identify who the designer is. And now when I go to actions to perform, I see my name right there. And like I said, you can even customize this grid. If I'm the designer on these projects, I might do a filter and just say, uncheck all, and I only want to see my own. And that's going to only show my own. I can save that as a personal layout if I want. I like to encourage everybody to leave it, especially on the get-go of using action items. Get your feet wet. Visually, if everybody's kind of looking at things the same way, it does make training a lot easier. Okay. So team members checking out, so opening up the action item is checking it out. So it automatically flipped my statuses accordingly if I have that set up just by checking it out. And then, if you reject, you do have to put a reason in here. So if I didn't have anything in here, it will tell me you have to supply a reason. Okay, so make sure you put why you're rejecting, what they left off. All that history is being tracked. Okay. Or just my notes along the way, or maybe this one was easy peasy and, acknowledgement entered, approximate ship date, 8/20/20. Whatever little notes you want to put in there. I love notes. So update just closes out the action item, updates anything that you've put in here. You cannot update this information, y'all. So if you try to go in here and you actually start typing, it won't let you. So that's the original information submitted to you. Okay. That's their note, their PO number, their quote number, things like that. But you can update here and hit update. That does not close the action item out. It just, it doesn't complete the action item and remove it from your queue. It's still down there. But I love to update that, especially in the design team. I might come in here, I'm claiming this and I'm just going to put my initials on it and come back to it later. I'm not ready to do anything on it. Maybe I just wanted to take a peek what it was and then update it. You can complete without any notes if you, don't need to put any notes there, but otherwise complete, must complete your action items to get them out of the queue. Once one person completes an action item, if you're a part of that whole entire group, it removes it from everybody's queue. Okay. Would you like to create another action item for this project now? That's when you can say, yes, I need to do something else, or no, I don't. So it gives you the option to do that. All right, let's see. I think I covered everything. So I'm going to open up for questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions, or feel free to chat them in. A lot of other little information down here. If you wanted to scroll over and see some different information, just check it out without even opening it up. Oh, one last thing. Not a whole lot of questions coming in. You can forward action items as well. You cannot forward them to a group, but you can forward them to an individual user. So down here, forward action item, you can forward to an individual. I believe that it wants you to put a note in, but maybe not. Yeah, you have to supply a reason. So this AI was not supposed to go to me. And it will remove it from your queue. If you see that little, if you're not seeing a question I get a lot, I'm not seeing an actions to perform tab down here at all. That means that you don't have any action items yet. So good on you. It will put a number there once you actually start getting some action items, and it does take a little bit to update. As admin, mine stays open all the time. Even if I don't have any, I can always see this panel. But you should be seeing a number there. One last thing. If you are in a group of people and they, you know, so-and-so is seeing 5 and the other person's only seeing 2. It could be that your days in advance are not set up the same as that user. I typically like to, on all new users, so when I'm setting up a brand new user, I just go in and I change it for them. I might add that to that new user checklist, actually. My preference is to just see everything. I like to see everything out there on the table. So when you hit this little red dot in your actions performed grid, so you have to have something in your queue, so at least one thing. So maybe you just go in and send yourself a test one to get this configured properly. But you have to have something in there, and then you hit the red button, and this defaults to 7 days. So days in advance, it would say 7, and you can just highlight over it and just type in 365. And there's no save or anything like that. You just tab or close out of it. What that meant was if I had an action item due date more than 7 days out, I wouldn't even be seeing it. I would see the number. I would see like action items 5, but I would only be seeing 2 in my queue. That could be the reason why. There's only 2 reasons why you wouldn't be seeing something you think you should. Or, I'm sorry, 3 reasons. That days in advance. The second reason is that you're not in that group to receive the action item. And the third reason could be inside of your actual profile. So in your user profile in the administrator, under salesperson manager action items, you are not able to perform actions for that particular salesperson. There's only 3 reasons why you would not be seeing something you should be seeing. And now I'm done. No questions coming in. I'll leave it open for just a couple more minutes, but if you feel satisfied and you are good to go, thank you for coming. Hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. This will be posted on our YouTube channel for reference, but if you want to reach out to me for any brainstorming, anything like that, please feel free. Everybody have a good one. Thanks a bunch.